Today, again, my name is Taylor Culbertson. I'm the clinical program director at Evolve Walnut Creek's residential treatment facility. I'd like to give a little bit of background on who we are and who we serve. So I've included a couple of slides here. We, specialize in teen treatment. So that's 12 to 17-year-olds struggling with mental health, substance use, and or behavioral issues. And we do offer, as you can see here, a continuum of care, starting with intensive outpatient and all the way up to residential treatment. And our residential model, is described in detail here. Basically, we're 24/7 support and supervision. We can accommodate up to 6 clients out of our residential facilities. Clients are getting some pretty intensive treatment with us here, individual therapy 3 times a week and 2 family sessions a week, and psychiatric consultation and support weekly as well. As far as our therapeutic approach, we offer a wide range of approaches and interventions, really relying on a core DBT component to each of our residential facilities programs, but we also provide cognitive behavior therapy, solution focused, a lot of family work, seeking safety and relapse prevention are also core curriculum for all of our residential facilities. As far as our presentation today, we'll be discussing understanding normal versus abnormal teen behavior. And again, my name is Taylor Culbertson. I'm the clinical program director here at our Walnut Creek RTC facility. So my hopes after this workshop are that, afterwards, after our discussion today, you'll have a better understanding of the different stages of childhood development, specifically adolescent development. Also, that you might be able to learn a little bit more about what could be considered normal versus abnormal, since those are very subjective terms. And identify when behavior could become clinically significant. I'd also like to share at the end a couple of resources for support, which includes a lot of Evolve's continuum of care and resources included on our website. So here's a couple of memes here I hope you will enjoy. I really love working with the teens, and they present a lot of challenges. And so just wanted to comment a little bit on that with some memes that are very popular with the teens themselves. So try to find ways I can relate to them in humorous ways. So I've included a couple of slides for your perusal here. And now for kind of the meat and potatoes of our webinar today, I'd like to kind of just give an overview of adolescent development. People may learn a lot about, development through the lifespan or child development, starting from birth. And I like to focus and hone in on adolescent development today. So when we talk about adolescence, we're really discussing the years between puberty and adulthood, during which there's a rapid growth, whether it's physiologically, intellectually, psychologically, and also socially. The main developmental task at that stage is for teens to really form their identity and prepare for adulthood. In the literature, teenage, adolescence is frequently portrayed as a negative stage of life, maybe a period of storm and stress to just be survived. And so I really feel, that my role and other professionals in the mental health field can play an important role in shifting perceptions on adolescence to more positive. That despite protest, teens do still need adults and want them to be part of their lives to help nurture, teach, guide, and protect them into adulthood. Developing brains and growing cognitive skills really increase reasoning and abstract thinking during adolescence. And emotionally, they're working on establishing their self and who they want to become. And a lot of the ways that they do that involve experimenting with new behaviors as they transition from childhood to adulthood. So first I want to talk about some of the physical changes as it relates to adolescent development. It's definitely marked by a growth spurt, involves sexual maturation, and there's numerous factors that can affect the onset and progression of these physical changes during puberty, which can include genetic and biological factors, maybe stressful life events, a person's socioeconomic status, their nutrition and diet, maybe the presence of a chronic illness. So those factors can or may contribute to, when these physical changes occur. But in general, growth spurts involving rapid skeletal growth, usually for females, start around age 10 to 12 and are kind of finishing up around, ages 17 to 19. And for males, beginning a little bit later, around 12 to 14 years in boys through age 20. So teens are known to spend a little bit more time maybe than previously concerned about their appearance, particularly in an effort to fit in with maybe the norms of a group that they most identify with and are trying to, to join in with. And puberty can also be associated with weight gain. Many adolescents can experience dissatisfaction with their changing bodies, and some teens can become overly preoccupied with their physical appearance, maybe beginning to diet obsessively, that sort of thing. Regarding, kids' cognitive development during this time of adolescence, what we're seeing is really a shift from more concrete black and white thinking to becoming more and more able to think abstractly and in shades of gray. So really the ability to analyze situations logically in terms of cause and effect, and really evaluate hypothetical situations, that haven't necessarily happened yet. Ideally, this higher level of thinking allows for things like future thinking and planning, evaluating alternatives, setting personal goals for their, maybe short-term or long-term. And also, growing in their cognitive competence can include such things as the ability to reason, problem solve, think abstractly and reflect, and like I mentioned before, plan for the future. Cognitive development can also include their ability to engage in introspection and mature decision-making. I also would say that despite this, most teens still need guidance from adults to develop their potential for rational decision-making. So this isn't just a given. There's still some hand-holding needed in certain ways. And level of maturity or judgment can also drop during mid-teen years before increasing again into young adulthood. So definitely not, a linear trajectory necessarily, something to expect so that, when and if that happens or you experience that with your teens, you're not surprised or maybe uncertain or concerned. Similarly, teens can experience what we might call splintered skills, which basically means having maybe talent or advances in certain areas of their development, and then maybe weaknesses or delays in other areas. And that's very common and also normal. With regards to teenagers' emotional development, really what they're working on in this stage of their life is establishing a sense of identity in the context of relating to others, maybe learning to cope and manage their specific emotional processes. And, adolescence isn't necessarily the first time they're experiencing emotions, but it's maybe the first time that they're able to really have the cognitive capacity to sort through and really evaluate who they are and what makes them unique. I also want to mention this isn't necessarily something that's set in stone as a teenager. This is really a lifelong reevaluation regarding their identity, but adolescence is the first time they have this increase in their cognitive abilities to kind of do so. I'd say self-identity is twofold and involves a couple of things. First being their self-concept, which includes maybe the set of beliefs that they have about themselves, whether it's physical attributes or their roles, their goals, their interests, and also can include their values and beliefs, and also their self-esteem or sense of self-regard, how they feel about themselves, how much others like or approve of them, or how much they like or approve of certain parts of themselves. This self-identity can also include experimenting with different ways of appearing, sounding, and behaving, maybe depending on a particular peer group that they're involved or engaged with. And I'd also encourage adults to continue to help enhance self-esteem by helping your teens face problems instead of avoiding them. And this can be done through problem solving, role playing, or providing information and resources if it's not something that you're able to help with. And then moral development. So really, teens can be developing a sense of their values and ethical behavior. Cognitive development, like I mentioned, lays the groundwork for moral reasoning, honesty, and other pro-social behaviors such as helping, volunteerism, and caring for others. And again, adults can ensure that issues involving fairness or morality are identified and discussed sensitively and in a positive atmosphere where the teens are maybe encouraged to express themselves, ask questions, clarify their values, and evaluate their reasoning as it relates to different maybe moral codes that they come up against. And then social development. So this, of course, relating to peers, family, school, work, community, because really a teen's world is shifting at this time of adolescence from the family more to the peer group. So this might look like decreased frequency of contact with family, and that doesn't necessarily mean that family closeness is less important to them. Teens might be orienting themselves towards peers in order to establish greater independence from parents. And there may be a new focus on peers, and that's an important and healthy new stage in their development. Reasons why peers are important is that they may provide the ability to bounce off different moral judgments and values and help define, how they differ from their parents' judgments and values. That peers also can provide information about the world from outside the family, giving a different perspective, and are also powerful reinforcers, as you may already know, coming, in the form of things like popularity, status, prestige, and just feelings of acceptance that they get from their peers are really powerful tools. And also positive peer relations during adolescence have been linked to positive psychosocial adjustment. So this is something as parents, you want to foster as much as you can in a positive way, for the health and wellness of your teen. And behavioral development. So a lot of testing boundaries during this time. Teens are experimenting with new behaviors to maybe help fine-tune their development in other areas, kind of test the limits and boundaries, see what kind of a response maybe they get from their peers, from maybe other adults, parents, of course, get that testing as well. And, when we talk about risk and risk-taking, that's actually an important way for teens to try out new decision-making skills and develop, realistic assessments of themselves as they relate to other people and to the world. So, certain exploratory behaviors are natural in teens, and they do need room to experiment and then also experience the results of their own decision-making, something we like to call here in residential as natural consequences. So adults have valid reason to be concerned about risk-taking behaviors, as many teens may have more unsupervised time now compared with previous generations. I know in the Bay Area, it's a lot more common to have dual earner households, with both parents working, and just increase in the work week over the decades really lends itself to more unsupervised time for teens. That can be an opportunity for teens to experiment maybe with sexual behavior, crime and delinquency, or substance abuse. So overall, risk-taking in teens is normal. The key is to provide guidance in decision-making and encourage positive outlets for this to occur. All right, stages of adolescent development. So even within adolescence, there are different stages that I want to draw your attention to. I won't necessarily be going over this, this grid entirely in detail, but I just want to kind of highlight some things, you know, going on in early adolescence, which is, you know, the period of time between 11 and 18 years of age here. Mostly with the onset of puberty here with regards to physical development, increasing their cognitive abilities like we discussed for abstract thought, and then also just, you know, a desire for independence, some of those typical awkward feelings, wanting to feel, you know, accepted, worry about being normal, maybe struggling with a little bit with that sense of identity since they're just starting on that journey. Middle adolescence here is described as the time between 14 and 18. So maybe puberty is finishing up or completed. Maybe cognitively, you know, they're starting to think of some of those bigger picture, more abstract things like moral reasoning, maybe the meaning of life, you know, goal setting, and socially, emotionally, you know, maybe starting to really distance from parents, having more of a drive for friends and reliance on peers, and maybe starting to experience, you know, feelings of love and passion in their interpersonal relationships. And then late adolescence here, meaning 19 to 21 years of age, typically, you know, fully developed physically, cognitively, maybe able to do things like delayed gratification or, you know, continuing interest in moral reasoning, ability to really think through their ideas, and, you know, socially or emotionally having maybe a firmer sense of their identity at this time, showing an increased concern for others. You know, peer relationships remain important. Maybe now they're experiencing more serious relationships, that sort of thing. And this slide will be included, you know, in the resources and handouts sent out for your reference at a later date as well. All right, so now after kind of a general overview of adolescence, how do we determine what is quote unquote normal versus abnormal? A couple of things to consider, you know, is that when we talk about those risk-taking behaviors, that can signal a potential problem since it might threaten your teen's well-being. So, you know, whenever there's a safety concern, that is something that could be problematic. Something else that can maybe be a little bit of a guide is determining if these behaviors are maybe beginning earlier than some of the age ranges that we mentioned. You know, if some of this risk-taking behavior is starting early at like 8 or 9, that might be cause for concern. Additionally, if it's ongoing rather than just occasional, you want to look at, you know, frequency of these occurrences or risk-taking behaviors, and also with whom are these activities kind of involving. Is the peer set that these, you know, behaviors are occurring within not necessarily positive or supportive peers? You know, are there multiple risky behaviors to be looked at? Because teens that are engaged in multiple problem behaviors are at greater risk for negative outcomes. You know, could have other risk factors in common, such as poor school performance or low self-esteem. And there are also those high risk or, you know, areas of most concern, including, you know, drug or alcohol abuse rather than experimentation, pregnancy, STDs, maybe school failure or dropping out, showing like a chronic situation rather than just getting, you know, an F on one test. And then, you know, anything that kind of reaches the limits of our laws, you know, whether it's crime, delinquency, violence towards others, would also maybe be considered abnormal or potentially problematic. All right, so we've got this, is actually a 2-page handout, so the flow may be a little bit clunky on the side-by-side screen here, but this handout really is kind of going a little bit more in depth into what's typical for adolescents and what would be cause for concern. So, you know, here's a list on the left here of pretty typical teenage behaviors, whether it's increased moodiness, increased self-consciousness, or maybe feeling an increased focus on body image, increased parental conflict, we mentioned, experimentation with drugs, alcohol, or cigarettes. Really what we're going over here in this second column is what's maybe not typical or cause for concern. So let's say, for example, an increase in moodiness. Oh, let me go backwards. If there's maybe intense, painful, or long-lasting moods, mood-dependent behavior that's risky, what might qualify as major depression or panic attacks could also include self-injury or suicidal thinking. So some of those more intensive, like clinically significant, behaviors may be cause for concern. How to know, especially with social media and everything, when does increased self-consciousness kind of go into the not typical or cause for concern category? That could look like social phobia or withdrawal, perfectionism or really unrealistic standards, maybe binging or purging behaviors, restricting eating, or just obsessive thoughts and maybe neglect for basic hygiene. We talked about increased parental adolescent conflict. How to know what's not typical or maybe cause for concern or outside support could be, verbal or physical aggression, or maybe like running away. Those might be, considered cause for concern. Experimentation with drugs, that kind of goes into the other category when there's abusing substances, maybe selling drugs, a substance using peer group. We talked about how peers are really reinforcing and motivating. A desire to fit in can be really important. So if that peer group is also engaged in a lot of this maybe not typical or problematic behavior, that could be cause for concern. Maybe stressful transitions, through middle and high school. That's typical. It's pretty typical to experience stress and anxiety through those big life transitions. Maybe not so typical would be outright school refusal, bullying or being bullied, maybe experiencing a lack of connection to school or peers, school truancy, failure, or dropout. So knowing how important peers are for teens, if there's lack of that connection in a positive way, that can be problematic as well, and that they're not getting all those benefits we mentioned earlier from their peer group. Over here, we've got increased argumentativeness, maybe criticism or being opinionated, maybe social justice warriors. What's not typical or cause for concern may be rebellious questioning of social rules and conventions, causing real trouble with family members, teachers, or others who maybe are in positions of authority. That's not necessarily going to be effective for these teens. Obviously, they're going through a lot of physical and sexual maturation and changes. And so it's typical to show sexual interest or maybe even experimentation. What could potentially be cause for concern would be some promiscuity, multiple partners, unsafe sexual practices that might lead to pregnancy. I think an increased desire for privacy is very typical. What's maybe not so typical would be complete isolation from family, real breakdown in communication, just routine lying, maybe hiding things, really like a breakdown in those interpersonal relationships. And I mentioned a little bit on social media. So strong interest in technology. Who knows what it's going to look like when my 2- and 4-year-old are teenagers? I'm almost scared to think about it. But that's normal. Showing interest in technology and social media, that's a way to have connection. What's maybe not typical would be many hours a day spent on the computer, maybe the content of what they're searching for, whether it's high risk or triggering, casually meeting partners online, or, lack of healthy and safe boundaries, maybe in the form of sexting, overly personal posts on Facebook, that sort of thing might not necessarily be considered typical. And then we've got messy room here. So I don't know many teenagers that default to having the cleanest room. And, that's typical to an extent. What might not be typical would be, maybe hoarding behaviors like old or rotting food, teens not being able to find their basic necessities, maybe dirty clothes covering the floor chronically, not, just every once in a while. And also sleep cycle. Teens need a lot of sleep. Here at our facility, they're going to bed at 9:30 because they're waking up at 6:30. We want to make sure they're getting 9 hours of sleep. So really, knowing that they need a lot of sleep, that's normal if maybe they're sleeping more than they used to, or maybe they're even changing their sleep patterns. Maybe they were a night owl or not so much a night owl before. Maybe they're starting to sleep later and, wake up later. What might be cause for concern could be, staying up all night, sleeping almost all day, routinely missing school if their sleep changes have impacted their ability to attend, whether it's in person or on Zoom, school because of their sleep, that could be cause for concern. When I say cause for concern, part of what I'm talking about is when do some of these things become clinically significant? When might it be appropriate to reach out for outside support? We talked a lot about how parents are really still very obviously important in teens' lives. And part of your job is identifying when you need to get help from the outside. So we call that clinical significance. When is something maybe better able to be addressed or met by professionals? So I would say a couple things will help guide that. First bullet point here, any thoughts, feelings, or behaviors that maybe reflect a dysfunction in your kid's psychological, biological, or developmental processes. So what the heck does that mean? If your child is involved in, severe chronic drug use, this can really arrest or delay a lot of their development in, many of the ways that we talked about earlier, whether it's cognitive, behavioral, emotional, moral, and any of those things. So, your teen may be 17, but if they've been actively, using substances since age 14, you may not be acting kind of their chronological age per se. The other way to maybe identify if what your teen is experiencing is clinically significant is to ask yourself if there's distress or, impact to their social, their occupational, or school functioning, and the relationships they have within those different areas. So, when the teenagers are in school, that's really their job. It's their job to attend school, get up, go to school, whether it's on Zoom or in person now. So asking yourself, are my teens' difficulties detrimental to their school success? Because a lot of those social relationships are tied to school as well. And if the answer is yes, we have some resources for you. There's definitely hope. There is help out there. So we've got our information here at the bottom, evolvetreatment.com is our website. And we've got our admissions line there at the bottom as well, the 1-855-920-3638, because really we offer a ton of resources and support, even if you're not a client of ours. Before we move to questions, I did just want to share, if you follow us on social media, we do have a blog on our website with, articles frequently about a lot of variety of things, whether it's, different diagnostic presentations, support to parents, common maybe areas of concern during the pandemic, for example. There was a lot of support to parents and families. So following us on social media will give you a lot of help and support, regardless of if you decide to, enter your child into any component of our continuum of care. So I'd encourage you all to visit us there, follow us on Facebook or Instagram. So here again are some resources, not only for teens, but the families as well. We've got the National Institute of Mental Health here, has kind of an infographic on the teen brain, 7 things to know. That could be helpful in normalizing a lot of the things that teenagers are going through, just to give a little bit of information about what is going on during this time of adolescence, specifically within the brain. Another resource here is Kids Health. I know it says Kids Health, but they do have a section for teens. And, there's a lot of information and resources for parents on how to talk to your teen about a variety of different topics, whether it's using substances, could be basic hygiene, maybe bullying from peers, like online, a lot of different great topics there and resources for parents as well. I mentioned our blog earlier, so here's a link for parenting tips and advice that we update frequently. You are also welcome to download digital versions of any of our helpful guides that we've created within Evolve here. And then also events for parents, whether it's, these webinars or, things for parents, other clinical professionals, other community members, those can be accessed at evolvetreatment.com /events, which I've also included here. So again, I just want to say thank you. Again, my name is Taylor Culbertson. I'm the clinical program director here at Evolve Walnut Creek. We've included our admissions phone number here. They're also available via email. You can call them anytime. They're open on the weekends as well. And we want to encourage you to continue learning about all things, related to teenagers. Our topic for our next community workshop will be how to assess your parenting style. That's going to be on August 25th. Register now on our website. Here is the link, evolvetreatment.com /August 2020 community. Thank you again for giving me the opportunity to share with you all today, address your questions, and talk about all things related to adolescent development. Hope you have a great day and hope to see you again next month.